This session is brought to you by Bloomerang. Bloomerang is a cloud-based donor management and fundraising software for nonprofits. Bloomerang offers an easy-to-use, clean, modern interface, all while helping nonprofits decrease donor attrition and increase revenue for better fundraising. To learn more, visit bloomerang.co.
Hello and welcome to the Power of Partnership, engaging library partners to reach fundraising goals. I'm your moderator, Christina McPhillips, and I'm pleased to introduce our two speakers. First up, Jenny Marsh is the Executive Director of the Vancouver Public Library Foundation. She is passionate about supporting the growth of connected, creative, and sustainable communities. And next, Tristan Classen leads major gift fundraising and planned giving at the Vancouver Public Library Foundation. He joined the foundation with 16 years of experience working with local, regional, national, and international nonprofits in the areas of major giving, community, and annual giving, marketing, and special events. And with that, I'll throw it to you guys.
Hi, Tristan.
Hi,
I think you're going to start.
Thanks, Christina. Well, it's a pleasure to, I guess, be here virtually. I know we're really looking forward to seeing everybody in Austin, but circumstances being what they are, this is the next best thing. So, Jenny and I have been looking forward to this for a while, just being able to talk and present and connect with all of you. And I hope, that you all get something out of this presentation. We're looking forward to saying everything. But I will say at the end, yes, there will be an opportunity for questions at the live portion. But if you don't get that opportunity to ask questions at that time, Jenny and I are definitely open to receiving emails or LinkedIn requests or any questions that you guys have. So with that, we shall start.
And before, that's us.
Yeah.
Before I get into, I can, talk about myself and the history of my work at the library, which I got to say is where we are right now. So this lovely background that you see behind you is the Vancouver Public Library Central Branch. And it's where I've been working from. I've called this place my office for the last 7 years, although the office itself is new and it's a space that we raised the money for ourselves. So that's a little fun twist on it. But we have been working at a central library for about 20 years. The foundation has, and I personally have been working with the foundation for 7 years. And over that 7 years, we've seen lots of change and transformation to both the library and how it works in fundraising and with fundraising, and also to the foundation, including the staff team here. So when I began, it was 1.7 FTE team, I think, myself and a part-time coordinator. And now we're a 6 FTE team. We'll probably go down a little bit over the coming year with changes, but we're still going strong, and we've achieved a lot with a small team over the last 7 years. And I think the reason that we were able to do that is really because of the work that, because of our partnership with the library and our ability to leverage the great might of the library staff and board and huge volunteer network to help support foundation goals. The library is about 100 times bigger than we are. It has about 750 employees. I believe it's the equivalent of 650 FTEs, so full-time employees. It's a much bigger organization and really very, very important stakeholder in our success, just as we are an important factor in some of their success, including the space that we sit in today. So our next slide shows things at the library and at the foundation when we had overcome a few hurdles. This, to me, is kind of a representation of what I had been working towards. You see on the left, is it on the left, Tristan?
It's on the left.
Okay, the chief librarian. Yep. Yeah, I never know if you're talking about
the brunette lady with the cardigan.
Yeah. So that lady was the head of the library at VPL for quite a number of years. I think about 7. She now has a senior position at the city, so we stay in touch. She's higher profile than ever now. But she and I went on quite a journey together, learning about libraries on my side and fundraising on her side. And here you can see her finally having fun and getting comfortable with the chair of our capital campaign, who was the CEO of one of the largest banks in Canada, and his wife, and an author, and they're at an event that the campaign chair was hosting to introduce some of his circle of friends to the library, and specifically to Sandra, our chief librarian. And I think if we had tried to get her into a situation like this 2 years beforehand, she wouldn't have been so comfortable, and they wouldn't have been having so much fun. But it's really important that you get to this point with your library staff, and especially if you're working on major gifts with your leadership team, that they and you and your key volunteers work together as one. So we're going to talk about how we got to this point and what we've done since then, because it's been a number of years since we got to that point. And, we'll talk about some successes. We will probably talk about some things that didn't work out. And we will also try to give some really practical examples of tools that we've used to build our relationship with the library. All right, so I'm going to start with the challenges. There were a few, they were pretty big. This one to me was the biggest. There wasn't a culture of philanthropy at the library when I arrived here in 2013. There had been a foundation for 20 years, as I said, but there wasn't much awareness or familiarity with the foundation amongst library staff, particularly amongst patron-facing frontline staff. But even, as you moved up through the organization, there was sort of increasing familiarity. But there may be familiarity at the senior levels or amongst senior volunteers, such as the board, in terms of knowing that there was a foundation, but they didn't really know much about fundraising and how it worked, what it involved, why it was important, and how they might help if they wanted to. The lack of awareness at the frontline level was so bad that we discovered several years later, library staff didn't really know that they could accept gifts on behalf of the foundation, and sometimes they didn't know that the foundation existed at all. They were actually turning donors away who were coming up to the information desk asking to make a gift, and they were telling them that they couldn't do that. It was a bad day for me when I learned.
Very frustrating for our donors.
When I learned, the one donor in particular left me a voicemail, and he had made 5 separate attempts to make a gift, and finally found our website and found my phone number and left me a voicemail. But I was so happy to be able to accept his $50 gift, and I hope he came back and did more. I should have checked on that before this presentation. Point is, there wasn't much culture of philanthropy, and there was a lot of learning to do. There was another challenge, and that was a real disconnect between stakeholder groups. So in my mind, we were all the same stakeholder group. We all really liked the library, wanted to support it. Whether we were associated with the library itself or the foundation was kind of irrelevant, but that wasn't really so much the case when you started talking with folks, especially board members. The 2 boards had very different political perspectives. They hadn't worked together before. There was a real unfamiliarity and almost a mistrust, I would say, or distrust. I can never figure out which is which. So that was a barrier to our success. Among staff too, I think to some degree there was, obviously the chief librarian knew there was a foundation and that the foundation had staff and the staff were professional. I met with the chief librarian as part of my interview process. So I think there was some trust, but, as you moved your way through the organization, that kind of got more and more diluted, just as familiarity got more diluted. And the foundation tended to be a little bit pushed aside and forgotten, and sometimes even considered perhaps a bit of an annoyance. So this picture, it's a depiction of sort of a low moment, I would say.
It's very representative for
in my fundraising career. It really represents that disconnect. I had come on to the foundation in late May 2013 and done a little bit of fundraising. It was a bit of a slog because we didn't have a major gift donor pool or much of a pool at all, but I managed to rustle up a few $100,000, and with that money, they wanted to create some recording studios, which you can see in the back of picture there, and equip part of the library as a digital creation space. And the library staff were really excited about this. And I was invited to the opening, which was great. I even knew when the opening was happening, so I could invite some of my donors. But what the library didn't think of doing at this point, which was, I think, early 2015, was including anyone from the foundation board or any donors or any staff in this moment of opening the new space, which was, significantly, I think about 2/3 of the funding was from donors. I remember our board not being super happy about that, and I didn't know what to say. I didn't realize that this was happening. I wasn't looped in on the script. The marketing communications team who planned this event simply invited us to attend. So, that was where we were starting from in terms of a disconnect people-wise. So in that environment, we had some things we had to accomplish. The library wanted me to raise some money for a major expansion of the central library that they initially estimated would cost around $10 million. We ended up raising, we're still not done actually, but we've raised 13 so far, and we'll, I think, finish it off over the coming years. So things are a bit weird now, but we're calling it a $15 million capital campaign. So we knew there was a multi-million-dollar capital campaign really needing to be done, but we didn't have any major donors. There were a few who had been involved with the campaign a couple of decades prior, and nobody had been in touch with them since then. There wasn't any policy or clarity in practice around philanthropic naming or donor recognition, and this is an area where the library and foundation really need to collaborate and cooperate together, but there was nothing articulated there, and so that was a challenge. And we didn't have a process to define what our fundraising priorities were or should be, and with that, I'm just going to move this. Let's see, sorry.
That's all right.
With that, we were finding ourselves just raising money for the same old 2 or 3 things that we'd always been raising money for because we knew that was allowed. But at the same time, the library wanted stuff. They wanted lots of stuff from us. We just didn't know what it was. So we had to work out a process to communicate that with one another. And that's what we had to do. Okay, so how do we address this kind of situation? We had another challenge. Tristan, thank you for reminding me.
That's why I'm here.
That. We can't address it until I go through all of our problems. Okay, we have more problems. This is a big problem now. At the time, really, when I take myself back to 2013, 2014, 2015, I wasn't really on my radar. Direct mail, annual appeal, community giving, we were focused on dealing with a major capital campaign, and that's my background. So, this was kind of off the side of my desk, but we fixed up our annual giving letter. And as you can see, we managed to improve our annual giving fundraising results significantly. I think the number there is hidden that when we got up to the very top, tippity top. Oh, are you doing that? Well, oh, cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
Sweet.
There we go.
Okay. So when over 3 years, I guess we more than doubled what we were raising. Having come from a large academic university, the numbers weren't very impressive. But the reason that they were so unimpressive is because we only had 350 people that we could solicit each year. So that's what I wanted to highlight here. I mean, I think it's great that we managed to increase giving so much, but this came with no increase to the pool of prospects that we were soliciting, and we couldn't find a path to increase that pool, and that is a real limitation for us in anything that we do, because the annual giving pool is eventually going to be a group of prospects who could potentially, in some cases, move up to mid-level giving or even major gift, and potentially planned giving. And if you're only working at 350 of them, well, guess what? A lot of them are old and they're not around forever. So you really need to replenish that pool.
Definitely.
And hopefully expand it as well. And And with privacy laws in Canada, we certainly didn't have access to patron information without significant cooperation with the library. And we also were facing a challenge in terms of when we did have prospects, what do we say to them? Like, how are we demonstrating our impact? Librarians are naturally protective of patron privacy and, really value and respect that. But without stories about the impact of our gift, it's hard to impress upon prospects at any level why they should be giving. So a few more challenges that we needed to address. Tristan, is there anything I missed there that you wanted?
No, I think you hit everything.
Yeah, there's a fair bit. So those are the challenges. Now we're going to move over to the opportunities. And here's another happy picture. This is more recent. And this shows our current chief librarian, Christina, in the red shirt, with a major donor next to her. His name is A.J. DeLaury. And you can see that his name is spelled out there behind them on a sign naming the large plaza located in front of our main library, our central library. So not a couple of years ago. Yeah, we did the naming agreement a couple of years ago. But we unveiled this sign just last September, naming DeLaury Square. And the other fellow there is the mayor of the city of Vancouver. And I haven't really talked yet about municipal politicians, but for our capital campaign, it was really important to involve senior municipal staff as well as politicians in our work, and that actually extended beyond the municipality to federal politicians. I didn't have much luck with the provincial ones, not discouraging folks from trying to engage your state or provincial politicians, because it's just kind of, it varies from government to government. But in this case for us, there wasn't really much money to access, so we didn't bother with them. But we certainly engaged government, and the most important government stakeholder for us, and I think most other Canadian libraries, and I guess most American ones too, is the municipality or the city. So I've been through 2 mayors now. And it was one mayor actually who solicited this gift for us, and it was another mayor who was there to unveil the signage with the donor. And, coming from that unfortunate situation where there was nobody unveiling our Inspiration Lab from the foundation, it was all library staff and board there pulling the curtain on something that, in my mind, my team and I had a lot to do with. Coming from that to this. Now, I'm not in the picture, but that's just because I don't like being in pictures.
We were all there.
I did MC this event. Yeah. And then I hid while they were doing the photos. I think maybe I was even, no, I didn't. Anyway, the point is that we were very involved in this. In fact, we planned the whole thing and coached everybody on the team, including the mayor. I did his speaking notes, worked with his assistant and his team, his communications team, to make sure that he was going to be there on time and say the kinds of things that we wanted him to say. So we went from being very uninvolved to really driving the bus on anything donor related. And to me, this is a very happy kind of resolution.
Definitely, yeah.
Captured on film in September 2019. And how we got there was really from the top down. So, we started with the leaders, Sandra Singh, our chief librarian, from, I'm going to say 2010 to 2016, I think, or maybe 17, 2010 to 2017 was the first person that I really had to build a relationship with. And then through her, the library board chair, the rest of the library board, her leadership team, and then eventually the mayor's office. And then finally, sort of trickling down to different management teams as I added staff so that we had more capacity to cultivate those internal relationships. Because I always, I come from a marketing background, and I always think of the library as sort of our internal clients, kind of like, if you have an in-house Marcom team, that's how you're supposed to treat don't see it happening all the time, but it's how you're supposed to treat the staff of the organization as your client, right? And I see the library as being kind of like our client in many ways. So they need stewardship and care and love. And it's nice to have more staff to be able to devote that to them. But from the beginning, when it was just me, I just worked at the very top so I could give them the best care and attention that was possible, and also have time for my donors. What am I missing here, Tristan?
I think there was, I think it was just, the importance of doing that top-down approach. So, we start at the top, and then that disseminating that culture of philanthropy, that those bridges that we're building, that relationship of trust and understanding, filtering it through the rest of the organization.
Yeah. And getting a gift from the chief librarian pretty early in the process was important, as well as soliciting the library board, which, has been an interesting journey because library boards change. We have to keep doing this. And so it's a new process of education. With each new board, we have to kind of go through this all again. And
definitely,
to some extent with each new chief librarian as well.
So speaking of boards, really want to emphasize the importance of connecting the board of trustees for Vancouver Public Library with the board of our foundation was absolutely essential. We really came into this looking to build trust by involving the library leadership and communicating with them probably a lot more than they were expecting us to, but just being really, really transparent about exactly what we're working on, our mission, our goals, building that trust with the leadership of the library. Jenny had mentioned earlier that, there was no real naming process for the campaign. So we realized fairly early on the importance of having that. So we worked extensively with the board of trustees and the VPL leadership team to establish, exactly why naming was important, so that substantial funds can be raised from people and organizations that may not otherwise be looking to give to the library, and to really get people excited about this transformative campaign that was going on at Central Branch here. So the foundation, came up with a naming inventory spaces that went to the VPL board of trustees for approval.
Actually,
go ahead.
I worked with the library staff to do that. So it was actually a librry staff member that took on the inventory.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I forgot to tell Tristan that.
No, it's okay.
He did his slide.
Finding this out now.
Yeah, because he came after this. So so we did that first, and then I kind of went through what already existed and checked that against the information that I had, which was what we knew probably would exist.
I gotcha.
Yeah, because there was a combo of renaming existing
new and old.
library.
Yeah. Okay. So
just to highlight the library staff piece.
There we go. So they were very open to the idea of this whole naming process. Just had a couple minor tweaks in that some areas were not going to be open to corporate naming, but we're open to donors wanting to put like an individual name on there. Yeah.
That was
Tell me if I'm wrong.
That was a big sticking point, actually. So the initial response, I think, from a lot of people who don't know much about fundraising is, oh my God, you're just going to go and ask a bunch of corporations, and they don't realize that the 80-20 rule applies probably in the inverse of what they think. It's more individuals, and we all, I think, would corroborate this. That most donor support comes from individuals. Corporate support's much smaller, but the perception of the library board was you're going to be asking a lot of corporations to put their name all over it, and it's going to undermine the values of the library. So we definitely had to make it really clear that that wasn't what our plan was, and we certainly weren't going to include any logos on the signage.
Definitely, that was a very big issue. Yeah.
Were you there for that?
Yeah, I was for the tail end of those conversations. Yeah, it would come up occasionally in board meetings. And,
That's definitely a trigger point.
Yeah, so that board of trustees of the library did have the final say onto as to who was allowed to put their names on the spaces. So if we had somebody who's interested in naming a space, their name was put forward to the VPL board along with any other information that was available. So background or that they would then approve. And so we also worked with the VPL leadership. And so when I say leadership, I'm kind of grouping everybody together, but it's the board trustees, but it's also the senior staff as well around prospect clearance. Going to them with our prospect list for the campaign for their approval. We really want to make sure that we're, building that trust with the library, but we also want to ensure that we weren't going to be approaching people and companies whose association with the library may have been problematic that, us at the foundation wouldn't have known about. So there is the library's been here for a really long time. We don't necessarily know every single nuance and relationship that's out there. So we did find out some interesting things for people and things that maybe we shouldn't go after because maybe, this was going to be an issue that we hadn't considered. But it was really good just to, make them involved with that process and bring them on board with that.
It was a really interesting process. And now that you're talking about it, I'm just going to interject, but tell me if we're going over time with one interesting little example. So sometimes we would learn stuff through the clearance process that we didn't know. Other times through the naming approval process, things like sometimes stuff was happening in real time politically that would affect our ability to name things. Yeah. And I'm thinking about one example in particular that would only resonate with Canadian library folks where there was a society named the Sir John A. Macdonald Society that had been planning to make a major gift and they wanted to name a space. And just as we were in those pre-approval conversations, I don't know how else to say it, the shit hit the proverbial fan around
don't believe that.
Around John A. Macdonald, who was the first prime minister of our country, but apparently conducted himself in some ways that no longer met with broad approval, and so there was. So I think it was actually the library board chair who flagged that this was beginning to emerge as an issue. And before it got bad, we were able to kind of find a way to pull it back without damaging the relationship beyond repair, although it was still hard to navigate. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it would have been a lot harder had it come later on. And it's a good example, I think. I didn't enjoy this at the time, but it's a good example of, realizing that the library board chair was really on our side and trying to help the foundation and the library avoid potential issues that could arise through public naming that would be controversial. None of us want that. And so, that sort of incident highlights that the library can, although it seems like they're just being difficult, sometimes be a really important and helpful partner. The library board, can be an important and helpful partner in navigating issues around naming.
Absolutely. Okay. So the library and the foundation have a, naturally symbiotic relationship where the library needs money for projects not funded by the city and the foundation needs projects to raise money for. So it really fits in well together. But we have unrolled a fairly new process. Like this is a year old.
Just barely.
Think, Jenny. Yeah. So this is really around overcoming that obstacle about not being on the same page for what funding priorities were, or just clearing up any sort of confusion. So just making sure we're all on the same page. Here's what the library needs funding for on an annual basis. This whole process takes about 5 months from start to finish. But we found it to be a really invaluable tool in building consensus and buy-in from all levels of the organization. And I'm glad that we're talking about this specifically, because I do remember in the International Public Library Fundraising Conference Facebook group, I think like 6 months ago, somebody posted, hey, does anybody have a process about this? And I meant to post this and I didn't. So I hope whoever that was is watching this presentation and taking notes.
Yeah, and we can also send you the process.
We can definitely do that. But hopefully, yes, you figured that out. But if you didn't, here you go from the horse's mouth. Here's our process. This usually takes about 5 months, like I say. It starts in January, which is the start of the VPL's fiscal year. But the first thing that happens is the work units of the library are going to submit their lists of what they need funding for to the directors group of the library. And then that directors group is then going to review and prioritize that list based on the strategic priorities of VPL. The next step is that our chief librarian and Jenny, our ED, are going to review that list to discuss the marketability and donor appeal of those projects that are there. And then once that's done, the VPL Board of Trustees then receives that prioritized list for approval. And this is just great. It allows us to collaborate on those shared goals. We get a front row seat as to what the library needs. And then we can just see, start the wheels turning about what would make this desirable for a donor to support. What's the impact going to be? So it's really great. It gives us a really long runway just to see, like, here's what's coming down the pipe. Yeah.
And we get to take things off that aren't marketable.
That is also important. Not everybody likes new carpeting for libraries. But
yeah. And so with the list, like what the VPL board typically receives is, a list that's been culled down significantly and prioritized by urgency and how likely it is that we think we can fund things. One of the other things we put in there, just so that the library board can see, is where we think the money is going to come from.
Yes.
So I don't know why we started doing that. It's not part of our process, but it helps me think through and talk with the chief librarian as we review the different projects. So okay, we've got $1 million, and it helps us see if it's marketable. So if you say, we need $10,000 for new carpets, okay, that could probably come from our undesignated gifts. We need $1 million for new carpets. Okay, find another place to get that.
Put a thermometer outside the building.
Yeah. Sorry, Tristan.
No, that's all right. Last step, Chief Librarian and Jenny will then present this list to the VPL Foundation board for approval in May. Once we have that, we can actually go out and fundraise. So this is something, it's repeated on a yearly basis. Some things we do recognize are going to keep coming up again and again. Major gift projects, the capital campaign around here, because it's a multi-year thing, that's always going to be on the list. Signature programs that are supported by the foundation, those aren't going to wind up. Those are always something that are going to be ongoing. So a lot of those things are still going to be just popping up from year to year. But again, working with the library that closely really gives us a really incredible opportunity just to learn, both organizations learn about our processes, our work styles, our culture, just builds that relationship of trust and familiarity.
I think it's interesting for the library to hear that we can't raise $1 million for carpets, because they don't see things that way.
They look as, we can raise money for the library, so we need $1 million.
So that's part of that fun education, and it really brings them on board. And then, if the library board have questions, we've reached the point now where the chief librarian can typically help them to understand why $1 million capital campaign for new carpets probably isn't going to fly. So that's great.
Yeah, definitely.
I feel like we have a real champion in our chief librarian who gets fundraising and engaging in these kinds of processes.
Definitely.
Helps,
I should also mention too, so it's like we do have this list. This isn't the be all and end all. So if we do have things that come up like emergency projects, or a donor wants to fund something unique that the library has always been looking to do, but didn't actually put on that list, that is fine. Like we can definitely add stuff to this list as the year goes on, and we have been doing that.
And the way we do that typically is by connecting with the both the chief librarian and then some of the management team. So that's really a communication process that's emerged from a stronger relationship with the library, and maybe something we wouldn't have been able to do a few years ago. But now we're at a point where we can sort of navigate, okay, Tristan's met with this donor who wants to do something that's not on the list. His next step is to run it by Christina, that's our current chief librarian, and see if she's okay with him discussing that directly, let's say with the teen programming staff, because they want to do something with teen programs. And the chief librarian will say, well, why don't you, instead of skipping all the way down to the mid-level, why don't you go to the leadership person who oversees the teen librarian staff first and check in with them. And so Tristan can kind of navigate his way because we've got this, this relationship and this guide in the form of the chief librarian.
And then this is something that I just learned this morning talking about this with you, is that the library, even after just doing this process once, because it's a fairly new process, so we've only started a year ago, libraries realized how well this works and is actually using the same process with their other fundraising organization, which is the Friends of the BPL. So it just, I think, really speaks to how good a tool this is just for, making sure that everybody's, running to the same goal line.
Yeah, they've made it part of the staff sort of activities, which is important because it means union staff aren't doing something that's not in their job description when they're creating their wish list.
Yes. So we've been working extensively with program management staff and library finance teams to really align our reporting and to track the funds that we're bringing and spending. So how this works is management staff, once we have that list of approved projects, they're going to identify the funding amounts they need for the programs that were put forward. We then work with the finance team here at the library to track the funds they received. And then we meet with those program management staff so that they know how much we've raised, how much we have left to go. And we typically do this, on a quarterly basis. But again, it's just I was going to put it up here, but it is just a spreadsheet. So it's not that exciting to look at, but it is just, here's what we need to raise for this program. How much have we gotten there? How much do we have left to go? What's the gap? And then we can kind of just, kind of align where we're focusing our energy. So if we have a direct mail campaign coming up and we don't know what we're necessarily going to be putting there for a specific program, we can go to this list and say, okay, well, our Mother Goose program needs $10,000 more for the end of the year, so we'll put that on. So again, it's just been really good, having those fairly consistent meetings, and then making sure that we're all on the same page.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that the foundation staff have actually become a conduit of communication now between different library departments as well. So, I mean, you would think, I was always thinking that, well, if we raise money for a children's program, the children's program people know that the money is there, right? Because we're telling the finance team, so the finance team would be telling the children's program team, you guys have money, right?
That is not how that works.
That doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And then I started telling the children's team, hey guys, we got another $5,000 for this or whatever. But then I realized they were getting those, but they're not counting it cumulatively because they're not the finance team. So they were trying to. Anyway, it was messy and really, I guess this is just me highlighting how wonderful we are and how lucky the library is to have us, because we're providing a real value add here, which is facilitating communication not only between ourselves and the library, but actually among different library departments. So helping everybody do their jobs, just that internal client kind of focus.
Absolutely.
And at the same time, guess what? It helps us too, because now we know what we're going to do our direct appeal for this.
Always good. I can't say this enough, but if possible, you should be including library staff in your interactions with donors and prospects, and that's what this picture speaks towards. Because there's Sandra Singh, she keeps popping up, but it's good just to kind of show that journey that we really had with our former chief librarian in terms of bringing her on board for our foundation activities. But we've definitely found that involving staff, library staff, and prospect and donor meetings as appropriate and as the situation warrants really allows them to be the subject matter experts in those meetings, in those conversations. And many of these library staff really appreciate being a part of that process. And we've found that the people we're meeting with in the community, those prospects and donors, also really appreciate having those staff there to answer program questions or provide information on qualitative or quantitative feedback. It's really great to have somebody there who can tell stories about patron impact that I'm not going to know, Jenny's not going to know, because we're not interacting with the thousands of people that come through the doors downstairs on a daily basis. So it's always a surprise where, you know, they'll just start talking. You can tell that the person we're meeting with absolutely loves this and is reacting to this and feeding off that person's energy and you know, maybe getting emotional about, you know, some, you know, at-risk mom in our alligator pie program. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, this is great. It just really helps just to have that person there. But, you know, with that being said, you know, and this is probably obvious, but just really important to prep these, you know, staff beforehand, provide them with, you know, background on the donor, an overview of the conversation, going over who's saying what, and just planning it down to, I'm one of these people likes to over plan. So it's like, you know, it's like, who's going to be standing where, and here's what I'm going to say, and here's what you're going to say. And if they're staying for the ask.
Even I block them out sometimes. Like if I block them out, I mean, did you use that term when you did, I think you did theater, Tristan. So I'm revealing it to the world now. Yeah. Sorry, but is that a term?
Yeah.
So you because
you block, yeah.
We would, even I, who do not prepare detailed notes in the way that Tristan does, would block out the tour because I found, hey, you know, we don't want our prospects facing this row of garbage cans. It's much better, or trash cans, sorry, this is an international
recycling bins.
There we go, recycling bins, that's really what it is. We want to turn them around so they're seeing this particular scene in the library, and you, the chief librarian, are going to stand here because this really frames you. And it sounds bizarre, but I think it provides a lot of comfort for library folks who seem to be more like Tristan and less like me and enjoy being prepared.
And all be winners.
and with that comfort comes confidence, and then they can start riffing and telling those fabulous stories that we then get to recycle and use them with us, because there's always this spontaneous tour where we don't get a staff person.
You know, it's, you know, like Jenny was saying, it's really important to remember that the library staff are not fundraisers. That's not their job, and some of them may not be comfortable or are
Most
terrified.
Of them are very terrified.
Yeah, about having these conversations like, oh my God, like I'm, you know, out there with a sandwich board and a bell, and it's like, you know, you have to kind of demystify it. So it's like, I think my role is really to make them as comfortable with the process and just explaining, hey, this is just a conversation that we're having. I'll do these things. I just need you to talk about why your role is important, why your program is important, and just framing it that way. But just, you know, when you're having those meetings or you're prepping, just making sure that we're being strategic about which staff member we're using, and just making sure that, you know, they're a good fit, and that their you know personality is also a good fit. So you want to make sure that they're not going to rub the person the wrong way, for lack of a better word. But
we definitely had still probably do have, although tours are off the table for a bit, but, you know, with each new chief librarian or set of senior staffing changes, I have a conversation about, okay, now this is your leadership lineup, who are we going to use? And then sometimes Tristan will, when he's planning his meetings, actually dip into management level or even like union staff, so staff who are, you know, sort of assistant managers or below, to take part in some of the meeting. And generally, I find the more junior the staff member, the more preparation you need to provide them, and the shorter their time in the meeting should be.
That's fair.
But you can involve staff at every single level. Just be thoughtful about who they are, because we cannot involve every one of the library's directors in meetings.
No, nor should you.
Well, I mean, you might be able to, right? Some library leadership teams might be all amazing people. Ours are not, so we're selective.
Yep.
I'll leave it at that. Tristan.
I think that's safe to say. But I would also say, last thing on this slide, another really great, much lower stress activity that you can involve your library staff in is recognition and stewardship.
Yes.
So things like a check presentation, or just, hey, I'll be bringing donor XYZ through the library. Can I just swing by and you just say thank you on behalf of, your work unit or something. So, or even just, writing up a testimonial for how much, their patrons or themselves really appreciate this. So it's definitely a low stress way to do things. So I'm not sure how many folks on here hold fundraising events, but I'm sure that those libraries that typically do, you'll usually have a senior library staff person speak at them or participate in some way. But what I'd like to share is something that we do, and that is having mid to lower level library staff participating at foundation events. So we've tried this model at our last two galas and found that these staff are really eager to help fundraise and act as ambassadors for their library. They can help run events or 50-50s or even run code checks. There we go.
You saw me peering at the thing.
And
one of the other things that Tristan actually led that was really successful for the library, for VPL with its gala, was engaging, I'd say mostly mid-level staff in promoting special giving opportunities at the library. So, I think for the most part with our coat check and stuff, we were using just pure volunteers, but
we had a couple library folks.
A couple, yeah. But with that one initiative that you were doing, they were really talking about their programs that they were running or had run and been involved in. And that was great because it's sort of like what we were saying before, they get to be a subject matter expert.
Definitely, yeah. And they're just, there to talk to our gala attendees and can speak to that, that impact that their program was having. But again, it is a great relationship building tool, and it lets them see something that's pretty cool where it's, we've got this library section that's just full of people in the community who are really interested in supporting the library or learning more about what the library does. And that's, I think, really powerful for them, because it's one thing for us to, I think, as foundation staff to say, hey, people really like you, and okay, that's great. But it's like, no, you can say like, hey, here's a room full of people who are just very interested in the impact that your library is having and that your team is having.
I think they also like seeing how the space transforms.
They definitely do, yeah. And there's free food and stuff too. Yeah. So. But we can also taking a step back from specifically VPLF events. Including senior library staff in partner events like author readings, networking, donor cultivation events. Again, it's being strategic about who you're taking along. Typically want somebody on your senior library team, but it also is great just to, it really empowers these library leaders to, maybe meet with senior business and philanthropic leaders in the city that they may not have ever had a chance to meet before. So it's again, a really great relationship building tool.
Yeah. And Tristan, I see you have a note here that you didn't talk about. Can I talk?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Because I think it's a good one. So just a flag, if you work in a system that hires union employees, as we do, and I think most Canadian libraries do, just be careful about asking union staff to volunteer. You got to kind of work through their managers, I think, with that.
You do, yeah.
I don't even do it myself, thank God. But it's a little delicate, so just keep that in mind if you're working in a system that's unionized.
Yeah. So I will say, meeting regularly with your library teams as much as possible is it's just basic, relationship building, but just felt it warranted mentioning here that, connecting with staff at all levels, engaging frontline staff members, you're getting that face time where, people will know that, hey, you work for the foundation, what's going on there? And, just, having those little conversations. But, we've really been, driving this, having a presence at many meetings that library staff are having, where we can present on foundation activities, we can take questions as to what's going on. So, some examples are branch staff meetings. So we've got 21 branches. I think we've been in meetings at most, if not all
some of them are tiny.
Yeah.
And we've been to all of them.
And it's, good for us to see too, because maybe we don't know what these branches are doing, but we can get an opportunity just to, as much as they can ask questions of us, we can ask questions of them, like, what's going on at your branch. And it's been really great just to see what's going on and getting, just things like a demographic breakdown of some of the branches and knowing who's using those particular spaces and having that plan our activity.
Yeah, and coming back to the challenges, it's been really interesting to understand why people were saying no to donations. And it has been, because sometimes it was lack of awareness, but even if it's not saying no, I am learning all kinds of things, little quirks of each branch that are different to make processing a gift hard or soliciting in a particular neighborhood hard. And,
you find those granular level details that you wouldn't know otherwise. Like you're just, kind of making assumptions, or like, they just don't know or something. It's like, oh no, here's like some genuine, things that are coming up, and
they don't have a scanner.
Yeah. Like, we did not know this. And it's like, okay, well, what can we do, to help move that along? But it's definitely been great. And then, just, people will have like, a ton of questions for, what the foundation even does. And then, we can help them to answer those questions. And then if, somebody from the public asks them what the foundation does, then, they have an answer, right? And it's
hopefully one that sounds like what we would say.
Be the right answer. Fingers crossed. Jenny, you were going to speak
to
talk
about the unions a little bit.
Allied organizations.
Allied organizations, So, for I said this a minute ago, but I don't think I could say it too many times. For Canadian libraries, at least for Vancouver, engaging our union, which is the Canadian Union of Public Employees. I got it. Thanks for writing it down. QP is so important because I guess about 85% of library staff in Vancouver are members of QP, and QP is a powerful union. So it really influences staff activity. I think the United Way exists in the United States as well, right?
It does,
And that's really a tool for, at least in Canada, it's a tool for union employees to engage in fundraising. And it presents almost a form of competition to us in some ways. I know that was the case when I was at University of British Columbia. There was a huge United Way campaign, and then there was also a faculty and staff fundraising campaign for UBC, and with such a large union presence out there, you really had to be careful about how you work together in timed campaigns and that kind of thing. So having an awareness of the union is important from a fundraising perspective. Also just from being aware that unions will want to have a say in what extra activities library staff are taking on that may be outside of their core job description. So that's one of the things that we have to be careful about when we navigate frontline staff engagement with fundraising activities. It's delicate. But we've I think really worked hard to align ourselves as allied with the union in that they care about and value what public libraries contribute to civic and public life. And we are here because we want to support public libraries. We share that really important core value with the union. And it's come to the point where our library board chair, not the current one, but the previous, had a day job actually with the union, and went so far as to solicit them for a contribution to our capital campaign, which we received. It wasn't a massive contribution, it was $50,000, but for me it represented a massive win to get that endorsement, because it speaks to the staff of the library when they know that QP is supporting the foundation. And then another stakeholder group that I think every single library well, maybe not, I shouldn't generalize, but many libraries will have a Friends organization.
Yep.
And in some cases, the Friends and the Foundation are intertwined. Here at the Foundation, they are not intertwined. We are not intertwined with the Friends yet. I hope maybe one day we will be, but right now we're separate. And it's confusing sometimes for donors who support both organizations or who don't know which one to support. So my goal really with the Friends was to get as close to them as possible and have as much communication as possible. And again, like with the union, they made I think their contribution to the capital campaign was $100,000, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so they made a larger contribution to our capital campaign, but that really winds them up and intertwines our success together. So I feel like we're close, and many of the Friends are retired librarians. So it's just another way of building profile and confidence among staff that we have very good intentions for the library with our work.
So with some more of our, kind of relationship building with library staff, this is something that we recently did. It's unfortunately rolled out just before COVID kind of happened. So yeah, great timing, but it was, very popular, or got a lot of pickup, but our 50-50 initiative, so library staff can sign up, make a donation, half goes to the library, or half goes to a monthly winner. Gives them a chance to donate to the foundation, but in many cases also introduces them to the foundation staff who they may not know, because it has to, at the end of the day, go through us. So it is just something that, they can all participate in, and it's just a great introduction tool. But, it is one of those things where, like the naming process, where we get to find out things that, we may not know. So we happened to learn that 50-50 draws were prohibited amongst City of Vancouver staff for about a decade.
They still are.
Still are, yeah.
But that's okay. Those rules don't apply to us.
Yeah, so it's fine. But, we didn't know this, and this is something, Jenny, I think you talked about with the head of
Finance.
HR and finance and the chief librarian. And, all signed off on it. And then
not finance. So I interrupted you too
that's
soon.
Okay.
I talked to the chief librarian, the head of marketing communications, and the head of HR, which I thought would have been good, but it was the finance head who had come from the city who reminded me that not all library staff would necessarily be enthusiastic about this because they were explicitly prohibited from taking part in these things about 10 years earlier. And in library staff time in Canada, 10 years is like nothing. Like you're practically a newbie if it's less than 5 years. So, I mean, it's just a little like it doesn't mean we can't do it. It's just a little more learning.
Yep, absolutely.
It never ends.
We're all learning together. So, another tool at our disposal is definitely around Library Giving Day. We adapted LGD to help engage more frontline and branch staff. So our capital campaign provided a great opportunity to engage senior staff and staff working from BPL centralized work units like finance, HR, marketing, IT, but it didn't really provide a lot of connection to branches or to frontline staff. So when Seattle Public Library and Carl Bloom announced the launch of Library Giving Day, we really saw it as a great opportunity to engage those staff with the foundation in something that was fun, something that was low stakes. Since we really have such a small database of community level donors and prospects, and a relatively low, small following on social media, especially when compared to the library itself, it would be hard to raise much through an online and social media campaign. So instead, we looked at branches as an opportunity to grow our prospect pool by really asking patrons to share their stories. And when those asks were coming, it was basically from the branches themselves. So they were sharing their stories. They're also sharing their contact information, which is great for us.
I did the eyebrows. I tried to do it.
Just like, contact info. So over the past 2 years, we've used surveys, prize draws, interactive in-branch displays to encourage patrons to share their library or share their contact information with us. We put a lot of time into connecting with branch staff to make sure that no one who wants to make a gift at the library branch is ever turned away again. And it's been a process. It's been great, because we've been able to go into these branches and say, hey, here's why this is important. Hey, if you're getting a gift, here's the info that you need to get from people, so we can give them a tax receipt. Here's why that's important. And some branches, like, the one pictured here, like really went all out for, like having a huge display and, activities and like giant walls of why I love my library. And it just great just to have, yes, people's contact info, absolutely, but also just really great library stories from people as to, why the library was important to them or what they used the library for. Oh, and then our 2020 plans for this year, we're going to include a lot of in-branch donor acquisition activities prior to Library Giving Day. But that, unfortunately, with COVID and, I imagine the same pretty much everywhere else, we had to shut down all of our branches. So kind of put a damper on that, but
also lay off all the staff of the branches.
That is true. Yeah. So hopefully for 2021, we can reactivate this plan though, because it was a solid plan.
It was. And what we were able to see with our rollout of 2020 Library Giving Day was a lot more engagement from VPL's marketing communications team. And we actually managed to get a few gifts through stuff that VPL was putting out on our behalf, reposts, and they had us in their newsletter, which gets emailed to some of their patrons. VPL is so, just to demonstrate how protective our library is of patron privacy, they won't send their own newsletter to patrons unless the patrons opt in. And I think patrons would probably want this newsletter. Like, it's not salesy. So, VPL has about 267,000 active card holders. I believe their newsletter only goes to 7,000 people who have opted in.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the level of challenge that we're facing in terms of reaching patrons. It's going to be a long slog, but we feel like we've got real partners in the marketing communications team to get there, and that's a great feeling.
Definitely.
All right, so here's Sandra one last time, pointing at her panel. She's now moved on to a role at the City of Vancouver, but she's pointing to her little panel on our donor wall, our campaign donor wall. So her gift to the campaign was big enough that it met the threshold, and she's there and she's very proud, and I think it's just makes me happy to see this picture, that she's so proud to be a supporter of the foundation, even after she's moved on out of the library. And I hope that with our continued work, we're going to be able to have more and more chief librarians peppering that and other donor walls. And I hope that you all will get in touch with us afterwards if we're not able to answer your questions during the Q&A that follows this presentation. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Thanks, everyone.
Hi, everybody. Hi, guys. Are you there?
Yeah, hi.
I'm so glad to have you. Sorry, I have a second screen and I am muting you. Okay, we don't need to hear you twice. So how are you? Thanks so much for your wonderful video. I did want to say we're going to do some rapid fire questions for time. But welcome, let's get to it. So we actually had a ton of votes for one specific question, and it was, we are a small with limited marketing staff. Do you have examples and advice of how partners can help in that area?
Well, do you want to try or shall I try?
No,
real quick?
I'll let you
I'll try really quick. I don't know what you mean by small exactly. We have 4 or 5 full-time staff, and we usually have a work study student. We don't have any dedicated marketing person on our team, so maybe it's comparable. We do we do a fair bit ourselves in Canva. Like sorry, the question is what? Like how do we do things, or how do we partner with the library?
How do we partner? How do we have partners help us with our marketing?
Yes. Do you have examples?
They don't do anything for us. The library does nothing for us. We just do it all ourselves.
It's all internal.
We used to, when I started, we used to try to get the library to help us, but I really didn't find that they seemed, remembering the union staff, they don't seem to have the capacity to take on a lot. So it's actually the other way around, where we do stuff and share it with their team. And that has enabled us. The only area where we really get a lot of help from the library, and this is the only area where I really want a lot of help from the library, is around accessing their media platforms so that we can reach their audiences, because they have a much bigger audience than we do, and so we're just borrowing their success on social media, but to do that we have to do things to help them too. So if we do a photo shoot, we give them the photographs. If we come up with an idea, I don't know, I write briefing notes or speaking notes sometimes that they'll edit for the chief librarian. We try to look for opportunities to help them rather than vice versa, so that they feel motivated then to help us, I guess, when and if they can.
Okay. Well, we have another hot question that a bunch of people voted on. So given the turnover of frontline library staff, how often do you educate staff about fundraising efforts?
Well, it's been changing over the years. So in the beginning, we didn't do anything. I don't know what the turnover is like in different libraries. Here, there are a lot of people who work for the system for 30 years, 20 years. It's not that unusual. Again, it's union, so people don't want to leave those jobs. They're kind of cushy, so it's less of an issue, I guess, for us. But there are some staff, really frontline roles tend to be the ones that turn over the most.
Yeah.
And so we've started doing branch visits to every branch at least once a year. We speak at managers' meetings, usually 2 or 3 times a year.
There's a lot of proactive outreach, I guess, from our end lately, just to make sure that people are educated on those front lines. Yeah.
But what we don't have a lot of success with is providing documents, particularly documents and training materials, because we've heard from the HR team at the library that the training package that new staff get is so thick, and then not only are staff having to train when they arrive at the organization, but they also kind of almost have to retrain as they move from branch to branch. So there's a ton of information for them to take on, and if we throw information about the foundation into their orientation package, chances are it's going to be the very last thing that they look at, and they won't get it. So we had looked at training new staff as they were coming on or doing special sessions, and we just learned that it's just information overload, probably not a good idea. So better to come in and go for the mid-level managers who tend to turn over a little bit less frequently, and they in turn can educate the very frontline staff who do turn over more frequently as needed and when they're ready, rather than when they're coming in and they're just facing major information overload.
I want to ask one last rapid fire question. And the reason I'm continuing on, even though we're a little over time, is we have so many questions. So we have so many people that voted for these questions. So what we're also going to do is have you guys respond to some of these questions afterwards, because this is a hot topic. Very exciting. How do your librarians react to having corporate sponsors of buildings, rooms, programs, etc.? Are they willing to mention them at a program and or on flyers? 30 seconds, go.
Yes, they are fine with it. We do have a policy where they have to name it, like the actual
they're
specific
required
rooms, right?
to.
Yeah.
So in our naming policy, we have established some requirements around naming, and we took a long time to work through that with the library board. There was definitely opposition to some of it, but what we require is that if you're doing a program in the Royal Bank Theatre or whatever it is, then you got to list, like if you do an event listing in the newspaper, it's got to say that event is taking place in the Royal Bank Theatre. There's signage. There's no negotiating around that.
It'll always have that name.
And what we have given in exchange is we have promised that we will never put a corporate logo on any of our signage.
So the name's fine, but not the logo.
Okay. Well, that's really good to know too. Okay, so friends out there, we know that you want to hear more of the answers to the questions. So we are going to have this lovely group respond to you directly in the app. Additionally, I may ask them offline if they'd be willing to do a meetup where they could continue this conversation, but we will see what their schedules permit. So breaking news coming at you eventually. I want to thank you both so much for being with us, and your session was so robust and it had so much wonderful information. So we appreciate you so very much. Goodbye, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you.